We'll have a piece on microphone. So, but anyway, we'll start out with a pledge and a prayer. So if you guys would stand and start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bradley Barker, would you please open us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day that we have. Thank you for the privilege of coming here tonight and hearing this presentation. Please be with the speaker as he speaks, guide him and give him the strength that he needs. Help each one of us as we go from this presentation tonight to continue the fight for freedom. Pray in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Thank you. Has anybody here not heard David Justice? All right. Excellent. Well, you're in for an exciting evening. Just to give you a little background on David, he's a veteran of the United States Coast Guard, aeronautical engineer, businessman, entrepreneur, paralegal, and talk show personality. He is the owner of Gunnison Valley Appliance in Gunnison, Colorado, where he currently makes his home. He is an avid skier, both on water and snow, and a musician, songwriter, poet, and freelance writer. A consummate student of revolutionary history, David is well learned in the principles of the common law, natural, substantive, procedural, and natural law, with a particular emphasis in political and economics. He has a reputation as a constitutional law scholar and for his understanding of the principles of the Declaration of Independence. He is a highly inspirational and motivational speaker. First and foremost, David considers himself an unaffiliated disciple of the gospel of Christ and has spent his adult years in a quest to sort through the barrage of confusion to discover the truth about America's roots. He is here tonight to share some of those perspectives.
So tonight's talk will be about enemy of the state. No, actually it's when civil disobedience becomes civic duty. In an age of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. That was George Orwell that said that. And as far as being an enemy of the state, when the state becomes the enemy, then it's incumbent upon us to become the enemy of the state. Matter of fact, we have a duty. It was Henry David Thoreau who said there's 1,000 hacking away at the branches for every one striking at the root. I like to go to the root cause. I work on air conditioning and refrigeration, and I make my living fixing problems, very complex problems. My dad was a TV repairman. If he didn't fix the problem, if he just chased after a symptom, he'd go out of business, as I would. They'd call somebody else if I can't fix the problem. So I study the circumstances today from a perspective of these are symptoms. What's the problem? And I follow symptoms back to find the root. And so I've been doing this going on 3 decades now. And so I'm here to share my findings. I consider myself the scout, the guy that went out first, put myself into uncomfortable situations with law and the system, and had to figure my way out of it. I'm very good at getting off on technicalities, getting out of trouble on technicalities, but I'm not interested in getting out on technicalities. I'm interested in striking a blow significant enough to set things back right, whatever that is. So in order to know what is right, a good place to start is the beginning. But where's the beginning? Do we go back 2,000 years? Do we go back 6,000 years? Where's the beginning? So we'll start at the beginning of America, because that's a good place to start. But really, for the purpose of this conversation, we'll start at the beginning of Colorado. Colorado, as you all know, became a state in 1876. And this here is a Colorado law book. This is volume 1, title 1 through 3. And if you go in here, and a lot of people don't know this, but I'll share this with you so you'll know. The very first thing you run into after the table of contents is the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is fundamental Colorado law. It doesn't get any more fundamental than this. The Declaration of Independence was incorporated into American law by the Colorado Enabling Act. For those of you who might not know, Colorado was a territory at one time. They wanted to become a state on equal footing with the other states, and so they petitioned Congress from the perspective of a territory, and they said, you know, make us a state. And Congress passed what they called an Enabling Act, and the Enabling Act authorized the people of the territory to form a constitution and state government and present that constitution to Congress. They made several attempts. Finally, on the third one, the Congress says, we like this one, so we're going to authorize you to form a state. Then President Grant issued a proclamation recognizing Colorado as a state. Inside the Enabling Act, it specifically says, and I am going to read it to you verbatim, well, I'll read this one. This is section 1, that the inhabitants of the territory of Colorado, included in the boundaries hereinafter designated, be, and they are hereby authorized to form for themselves out of said territory a state government with the name of the state of Colorado, which state, when formed, shall be admitted into the Union upon an equal footing with the original states in all respects whatsoever. In section 4, it specifically says that the government, the Constitution of Colorado, shall be Republican in form and not be repugnant to the Constitution of the United States and the principles of the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to make a distinction here. Notice it says principles. Can you touch a principle? Can you smell it, see it, taste it? A principle is an abstract concept. So we need to move into the realm of abstracts when we start talking about law, because law is the expression of principle, which is an abstract. So the Colorado Constitution, in form and substance, shall not be repugnant to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. So, that being said, there's a presumption built into Colorado law that the Constitution of Colorado rests upon the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And those principles are expressed in Article 1 of the Constitution for the state of Colorado, which you will find right after the Declaration of Independence in Book 1. It says, and this is the shocking part, this is the part in an age of universalism, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So here it goes. What I'm about to say is a revolutionary act. I'm reading the Colorado Constitution. All political power is vested in and derived from the people. What a concept. All government of right originates from the people. Is founded upon their will only and instituted solely for the good of the whole. People may alter or abolish form of government. This is in the Colorado Constitution. What a revolutionary document. The people of this state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and to alter and abolish their constitution and form of government whenever they may deem it necessary for their safety and happiness. Okay, so that's a revolutionary concept. I wonder how the Department of Homeland Security feels about that. Well, that's terrifying. As a matter of fact, when the people take on this capacity, that's a terrifying concept. You mean the people can think for themselves? Well, you know, the well-regulated militia necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the why. How can the people alter and abolish the Constitution and form of government if they've been deprived of the means to that end? And so it only seems reasonable that if the government is actually involved in a conversation to take away that from the sovereign people, we must be getting really close to the federal government or the state government operating contrary to the will of the people, and they're running scared, which is a very real likely possibility, especially when I show you a few more things tonight. Thomas Jefferson said it's the natural progress of things. The natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and government to gain ground. It was Lord Acton that said power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men. It was Thomas Jefferson wrote to Judge Spencer Rowan in 1819, it should be remembered as an axiom of eternal truth in politics that whenever power in any government is independent, is absolute also. You know, we come through a public education system that has indoctrinated us into the belief system that the federal government can do anything it wants to if it has the majority vote in Congress. It can pass a law, and then if that law makes it through constitutional muster through the Supreme Court, that it can basically do anything it wants to. We have that notion because we've seen that at work. And by a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court can make a decision that's completely unconstitutional and make it constitutional. This is not the principles upon which America is established. Thomas Woods, who is a constitutional scholar, wrote a book called Nullification. In the end, the people have the final say and can nullify any law that they feel is constitutionally not consistent with the principles of law. Remember, all power is vested in and derived from the people, so the people have the absolute say. The question that we're faced with today is who's the people? I mean, when we have a schizophrenic body of people where we're all tugging and pulling, you know, and public opinion seems to be the barometer, who is the people ultimately that gets to decide what constitutes the truth and what is within the scope and power of the government? And so those are the concepts that I like to discover, I like to explore, and we have to go into the realm of principle to get there. If you go back into the Declaration of Independence, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. We'll include women in that formula. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and some would argue that that word is unalienable. Bottom line is they can't be separated from us. Now that principle is expressed in the Colorado Constitution. We, the people of Colorado, yes, there's a preamble to the Colorado Constitution. And for those of you who might not know, in some ways this Constitution is more powerful than the federal Constitution if we knew how to use it. Knowing how to wield the sword, knowing how to wield the knowledge is really critical when you're doing battle with lawyers and judges in a system that's completely corrupt. So, wow, man, we got some agreement here. We, the people of Colorado, with profound reverence for the supreme ruler of the universe. Okay, now here's the concept. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator, with certain unalienable rights. According to the Colorado Constitution, all political power is vested in and derived from the people. Well, who vested it in the people? If you follow the logic, the vestment comes from the higher law, or the natural law, that emanates from the Creator. The Creator is the supreme ruler of the universe. If we dismiss that concept out of American jurisprudence, nothing makes sense. In America, liberty and freedom are certain unalienable rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, you know, in today's age, we think of liberty as anarchy. The government looks upon liberty as anarchy. Oh, these people can't be free, they're not responsible. So we need more laws to tell them how to live because they can't be free, because if they did that, we might lose control. So we live in an age where liberty and anarchy are put over here into the same bucket and condemned. And this is a really dangerous concept when we have a government whose end function is to secure life and liberty, among which Among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Excuse me. To secure these rights, please, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This term, consent of the governed, is where we need to focus. We're entering into a revolutionary age, whether we like it or not. We can either lay down and play dead and let this thing run over the top of us, or we can focus on where the government gets its power and begin to withdraw our consent. If we can withdraw our consent, we can begin to push back on that simple principle alone, because that principle is the principle upon which all just power rests. I just did that in a circle, arrived at the same place. If you begin there, you'll always end there. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Well, what if we don't object? To not object is to consent. What if we decide to remain silent? Well, if you have a duty to speak, silence is consent. So, we need to understand the principle of consent. The Native American people, they were silent when they should have been, when they shouldn't have been, and that was construed as consent. So sometimes this principle of consent can bite us if we're not careful with it. So understanding the principle of consent is really critical. Now, what I don't consent to is an abuse of federal power. What I don't consent to is abuse of any kind of government power at all. And so whenever I see an opportunity to stand against that, I put myself in harm's way. I've done jail. I've been in jail on principle, doing acts of civil disobedience on purpose. And I did that because I wanted to get on the other side. I wanted to see what that looked like. I wanted to try it on. Before I ever got up in front of you today and would say some of the things that I've want to share with you, I tried it on. So, but going back to the beginning, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to lay a concept on you. This is one that I had to discover just from studying law. There's the federal constitution and there's the state constitution. Okay, the federal constitution creates and controls the federal government. The state constitution creates and controls the state government. They're two completely different entities. The state government is not an agent of the federal government, except in the places where they've accepted a subsidy or a contract and subjugated themselves to certain rules and regulations that they wouldn't otherwise be subject to. So to whatever degree the state of Colorado has surrendered by entering into a contract, to that same degree, Colorado has been subjugated under federal control and jurisdiction. Understanding that is really important if we're going to rightly divide these governments. And so what I'm going to do today is spend the next hour or so just making some distinctions between state, federal, and individual power. The 10th Amendment to the Federal Constitution says all power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it, Constitution, to the states is reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The 10th Amendment to the Federal Constitution sums up power. Every one of us in here has personal individual power. There was a time when we used to think a man's home is his castle, right? That we used to think that used to be what we thought. But recently people can get shot right in their own front door. People can get, we got a government now that is breaking down the front door without warrants. That's because